I grew up in Bed-Stuy when the crack epidemic was still burning through Brooklyn like wildfire, leaving behind hollow buildings and broken families in neighborhoods that used to mean something. My mother worked double shifts at a hospital in Manhattan, trying to keep us away from the corners where young men traded their futures for quick money and respect that lasted only as long as their next arrest. But poverty has its own gravity, pulling you toward the very things your family sacrifices to avoid. When I was 16, I started running small packages for local dealers, nothing major, just enough to buy the sneakers and chains that marked you as someone worth respecting in a world where respect was the only currency that mattered. The Nine Trey Gangsters weren't the biggest set in Brooklyn, but they had something more valuable than size. They had connections that reached into the music industry, the fashion world, and the drug trade simultaneously. Unlike other gangs that focused exclusively on moving product or controlling territory, Nine Trey understood that influence and money could be multiplied by operating in multiple spheres at once. They weren't just street dealers. They were entrepreneurs who recognized that the entertainment industry provided the perfect laundering mechanism for drug money while also generating legitimate income streams that could sustain the organization even when law enforcement cracked down on traditional criminal activities. My introduction to the real structure of Nine Trey came through Marcus Williams, a veteran member who had been with the set since its formation in the early 1990s. Marcus wasn't flashy like some of the younger members who wore their affiliations like badges of honor. He moved quietly through the neighborhood, conducting business with the understated efficiency of someone who understood that attention from law enforcement was the enemy of longevity. The ones you see on Instagram aren't the ones making the real decisions, he told me during one of our early conversations. They're performers, playing a role for the cameras while the real business happens in rooms where no phones are allowed. When I first heard about Jamel Jones, known throughout Brooklyn as Mel Murda, he was already being talked about as one of the rising leaders within Nine Trey. His reputation was built on a combination of street credibility and business acumen that impressed both the old heads and the young soldiers looking for direction. Mel had done time upstate, establishing connections within the prison system that proved valuable when Nine Trey members found themselves facing charges. He also had relationships with suppliers who could provide quality product at competitive prices, making him valuable to the organization's financial operations. But even then, there were whispers that Mel's apparent authority was more symbolic than substantive, that decisions attributed to him were actually coming from someone else. Entirely. The transformation of Nine Trey's public profile began when they started associating with rappers and entertainers who needed street credibility to authenticate their artistic personas. Hip-hop had always maintained connections to street culture, but by the mid-2010s, the relationship had become more commercialized and explicit. Rappers weren't just referencing gang culture in their lyrics. They were actively recruiting gang members as part of their entourages, paying for protection, services, and using gang affiliations as marketing tools to enhance their authenticity with audiences. Nine Trey recognized this as an opportunity to expand their influence and revenue streams beyond traditional criminal activities. The first time I saw Daniel Hernandez, who would later become known as 6ix9ine, he was just another young man from Bushwick trying to make it in the music industry through a combination of talent, controversy, and calculated provocations. He understood instinctively that in an oversaturated market, artists needed more than just musical ability to capture attention. They needed stories, conflicts, and associations that would generate the kind of viral moments that translated into streams, views, and ultimately money. His rainbow hair, aggressive persona, and willingness to court controversy were all part of a carefully constructed image designed to maximize attention in an industry where visibility was everything. What most people didn't understand about 6ix9ine's relationship with Nine Trey was that it wasn't a typical artist-gang affiliation where the rapper paid for protection or credibility. Instead, it was a more complex business partnership that benefited both parties in ways that extended far beyond simple financial transactions. 6ix9ine provided Nine Trey with mainstream visibility, legitimate business opportunities, and access to revenue streams that would have been impossible to reach through traditional criminal activities. In return, Nine Trey provided him with authentic street credibility, protection from rivals, and access to a distribution network that could move both his music and other products. The man orchestrating this entire arrangement was someone most people had never heard of, Kevin Thompson, known in certain circles as KT. Kevin wasn't a typical gang member in any conventional sense. He had grown up in the same neighborhoods as the rest of us, but he had managed to acquire education and business experience that set him apart from most street-level operators. He understood finance, logistics, and marketing in ways that allowed him to see opportunities that others missed. Most importantly, he understood that the most valuable position in any organization was the one that remained invisible to outside observers, particularly law enforcement. Kevin's background was unique among Nine Trey associates. He had attended community college, studying business administration and computer science before dropping out to pursue more immediate income opportunities. But unlike most people who left school for the streets, Kevin retained the analytical mindset and strategic thinking that formal education had begun to develop. He could read financial statements, understand market dynamics, and plan long-term operations with the sophistication of a legitimate businessman. These skills made him invaluable to Nine Trey, but they also made him careful about maintaining distance from activities that could expose him to legal consequences. The genius of Kevin's approach was recognizing that the music industry provided the perfect cover for sophisticated money laundering operations. Record labels, concert promotions, merchandise sales, and streaming revenues created multiple revenue streams that could obscure the origins of funds while generating legitimate income that could support both the gang's operations and individual members' lifestyles. By positioning himself as 6ix9ine's primary supplier, not just of drugs, but of everything from jewelry to studio time to promotional services, Kevin created a business relationship that appeared completely legitimate from the outside while serving the gang's interests perfectly. I witnessed the complexity of this operation firsthand when I was assigned to coordinate between different aspects of 6ix9ine's career and Nine Trey's business interests. Kevin had established multiple shell companies that provided various services to the rapper: production companies, security firms, jewelry suppliers, and promotional agencies. Each company appeared to operate independently, with legitimate business licenses and tax filings that would satisfy even careful scrutiny. But in reality, they were all controlled by Kevin and served as vehicles for moving money between 6ix9ine's entertainment income and Nine Trey's various operations. The drug operation that funded much of this empire was more sophisticated than typical street-level dealing. Kevin had established relationships with suppliers who could provide high-quality product in quantities that allowed for wholesale distribution rather than retail sales. The drugs weren't being sold on street corners by gang members wearing colors. They were being moved through networks of clubs, recording studios, and entertainment venues where the clientele had money and discretion. This approach reduced the risk of law enforcement attention while maximizing profit margins and creating customer bases that were unlikely to cooperate with police investigations. Meanwhile, Mel Murda's role became increasingly ceremonial as Kevin consolidated real control over Nine Trey's operations. Mel retained the title and public recognition of leadership, appearing at events and making decisions about matters that seemed important but were actually peripheral to the organization's core business. Kevin encouraged this arrangement because it served his interests perfectly. Mel absorbed attention from law enforcement and rival gangs while Kevin operated in complete anonymity, making the decisions that actually determined the organization's direction and success. The relationship between 6ix9ine and Kevin extended far beyond simple business transactions. Kevin became the rapper's primary advisor, counselor, and strategist, helping him navigate both the music industry and the complex world of gang politics. When 6ix9ine needed beats, Kevin's production companies provided them. When he needed security, Kevin's firm supplied it. When he needed drugs for personal use or to share with collaborators, Kevin's network delivered them. When he needed bail money or legal representation, Kevin's resources made them available. In every aspect of 6ix9ine's career, Kevin was the invisible hand ensuring that needs were met and problems were solved. The sophistication of Kevin's operation became clear when I learned about the financial structures he had created to support the entire enterprise. Money from drug sales was invested in legitimate businesses that generated clean income streams. Profits from those businesses were used to fund more drug purchases, creating a cycle that grew exponentially over time. Meanwhile, 6ix9ine's entertainment income provided additional capital that could be used to expand operations, purchase equipment, and establish new revenue streams. The entire system was designed to be self-sustaining and growth-oriented, like a legitimate corporation that happened to include illegal activities as part of its business model. Kevin's understanding of law enforcement tactics was equally sophisticated. He knew that agencies focused their investigations on visible leaders and obvious criminal activities, so he structured the organization to minimize both. Mel Murda's public profile as a gang leader drew attention away from Kevin's actual leadership role. The integration with the entertainment industry made financial transactions appear legitimate even when they were actually serving criminal purposes. The use of multiple shell companies and complex business arrangements made it nearly impossible for investigators to trace money flows or establish criminal conspiracies through traditional methods. The irony was that 6ix9ine's growing fame actually provided additional protection for Kevin and Nine Trey's operations. As the rapper became more successful and controversial, media attention focused increasingly on his public persona and legal troubles, while ignoring the sophisticated business structures that enabled his career. Law enforcement agencies that might have investigated Nine Trey's operations were distracted by 6ix9ine's high-profile conflicts and legal issues. The more famous and controversial he became, the more invisible Kevin's role in the organization became. I participated in meetings where Kevin would outline strategies for maximizing both 6ix9ine's career prospects and Nine Trey's business opportunities. These sessions felt more like corporate board meetings than traditional gang discussions. Kevin would present detailed analyses of market trends, competitive landscapes, and operational risks. He understood streaming algorithms, social media engagement metrics, and fan psychology in ways that most record label executives never mastered. His ability to translate street credibility into commercial success was extraordinary, turning Nine Trey's reputation into a valuable brand that could generate revenue across multiple platforms. The drug operation that funded everything was carefully integrated into the entertainment activities in ways that made detection nearly impossible. Studios where 6ix9ine recorded his music also served as distribution points for high-end drugs sold to other artists, producers, and industry professionals. Concert venues became opportunities to establish new supply chains in different cities. Music video shoots provided cover for meetings between Kevin and his suppliers or distributors. Every aspect of 6ix9ine's career was simultaneously serving Kevin's criminal enterprises while appearing completely legitimate to outside observers. Kevin's control over information was absolute within the organization. Most Nine Trey members knew only their specific roles and responsibilities, with no understanding of how their activities connected to the larger operation. Communication was tightly controlled, with Kevin serving as the central hub for all significant decisions and information flows. Even Mel Murda, despite his apparent leadership position, only received information that Kevin wanted him to have. This compartmentalization protected the operation from both law enforcement penetration and internal betrayals, ensuring that no single arrest or cooperation could compromise the entire enterprise. The relationship between Kevin and 6ix9ine was built on mutual dependence that went beyond simple business calculations. Kevin needed 6ix9ine's fame and income to legitimize and expand his operations, while 6ix9ine needed Kevin's resources and connections to maintain his lifestyle and career momentum. Neither could achieve their goals without the other, creating a partnership that was more stable and committed than typical criminal associations. Kevin wasn't just 6ix9ine's supplier. He was his business partner, advisor, and enabler, providing everything necessary to sustain the rapper's success while using that success to build his own empire. The sophistication of Kevin's psychological manipulation was remarkable. He understood how to motivate different types of people, whether they were street-level dealers, entertainment industry professionals, or law enforcement officers. With gang members, he emphasized loyalty, respect, and the promise of advancement within the organization. With industry contacts, he focused on business opportunities, professional relationships, and mutual benefit. With law enforcement, he maintained complete invisibility while ensuring that other people attracted attention and scrutiny. His ability to present different faces to different audiences while maintaining complete control over the organization was extraordinary. As 6ix9ine's fame grew and his legal troubles multiplied, Kevin adapted the operation to minimize exposure while maximizing benefits. He began distancing himself from direct involvement in drug transactions, instead focusing on the legitimate business activities that had grown out of his original criminal enterprises. The shell companies he had created to launder drug money had become profitable in their own right, generating enough legitimate income to support the organization even if the drug operations were compromised. This transition from criminal to legitimate activities was gradual and strategic, positioning Kevin to survive even if law enforcement successfully targeted other aspects of Nine Trey's operations. The beginning of the end came when federal agencies finally understood the true structure of Nine Trey and Kevin's role in running the organization. My cooperation with authorities was prompted by an arrest on unrelated charges that gave me the choice between life in prison and providing information about the gang's operations. Initially, agents were skeptical about my claims regarding Kevin's leadership role, since all their intelligence had focused on Mel Murda and other visible gang members. It took extensive documentation and corroborating evidence before they began to understand how sophisticated the actual power structure was. When I explained Kevin's relationship with 6ix9ine and the integration between criminal and legitimate activities, the agents realized they had been investigating the wrong targets using the wrong methods. Kevin's operation was too sophisticated for traditional gang investigation techniques. It required financial analysis, corporate investigation methods, and entertainment industry expertise that most law enforcement agencies weren't equipped to provide. The revelation that a major rap star's entire career was essentially a front for sophisticated criminal enterprises sent shockwaves through both law enforcement and the music industry. The federal investigation that followed my cooperation was one of the most complex operations I had ever seen. Agents had to trace financial flows through dozens of shell companies, analyze streaming revenues and concert profits, and understand the intricate relationships between gang activities and entertainment industry practices. They brought in specialists from financial crimes units, organized crime task forces, and even the Securities and Exchange Commission to help unravel Kevin's business empire. The scope of the investigation revealed how successfully Kevin had blurred the lines between legitimate and criminal activities. Kevin's arrest, when it finally happened, was almost anticlimactic. Unlike the dramatic raids that had captured other gang leaders, Kevin was taken into custody during a routine business meeting at a Manhattan office building where he was discussing investment opportunities with potential partners. He wasn't armed, wasn't surrounded by gang members, and wasn't engaged in any obviously criminal activity. To outside observers, he looked like any other successful businessman who had been caught up in a financial investigation. Only those who understood the true scope of his operations realized that his arrest represented the collapse of one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises in modern gang history. The trials that followed exposed the complexity of Kevin's operation and the extent to which legitimate businesses had been integrated with criminal activities. Prosecutors presented evidence showing how drug money had been laundered through record sales, how concert revenues had funded additional drug purchases, and how 6ix9ine's entire career had been orchestrated to serve Kevin's criminal enterprises. The entertainment industry was forced to confront the reality that one of its most successful recent artists had been essentially a marketing tool for a sophisticated drug operation. 6ix9ine's cooperation with federal authorities, while sensational in its public presentation, was actually less valuable than prosecutors had hoped because his knowledge of the operation's structure was limited. Kevin had carefully controlled the information available to the rapper, ensuring that 6ix9ine knew only what was necessary for his role in the enterprise. The most damaging testimony came from financial records and business documents that revealed the true scope of Kevin's operations, rather than from insider accounts of criminal activities. Mel Murda's conviction and imprisonment confirmed what many of us had suspected. He had been a figurehead whose apparent authority masked Kevin's actual control over Nine Trey. During his trial, evidence emerged showing that most decisions attributed to Mel had actually originated with Kevin, who had used Mel's reputation and visibility to maintain control while avoiding scrutiny. Mel's willingness to accept this role had been motivated by a combination of loyalty to the organization and recognition that Kevin's leadership was more effective than anything he could provide himself. The collapse of Kevin's empire revealed how successful his strategy had been at integrating criminal and legitimate activities. Many of the businesses he had created continued operating even after his arrest, generating legal income for employees who had no knowledge of their criminal origins. The music production companies, security firms, and promotional agencies had become genuinely profitable enterprises that could sustain themselves without drug money. Kevin had successfully transitioned from criminal to legitimate business operations, even though his arrest prevented him from enjoying the benefits of that transition. The investigation also revealed the extent to which Kevin had influenced the broader hip-hop industry through his relationship with 6ix9ine. Other artists had adopted similar strategies for integrating street credibility with commercial success, often using gang associations as marketing tools without understanding the criminal enterprises they were actually supporting. Record labels had begun developing business relationships with gang-affiliated service providers, inadvertently becoming part of money laundering operations they didn't recognize. Kevin's model had inspired imitators throughout the industry, multiplying the connections between entertainment and organized crime. Looking back on my time within Nine Trey and my observations of Kevin's operation, I'm struck by the sophistication of what he accomplished. He didn't just run a criminal organization. He created a new model for how illegal enterprises could operate within legitimate industries. His understanding of business principles, market dynamics, and psychological manipulation allowed him to build something that transcended traditional gang structures. He proved that the most successful criminal operations were those that appeared completely legitimate to outside observers. The personal cost of Kevin's success was something that most people never considered. While he had accumulated wealth and power beyond what most gang members could imagine, he had also isolated himself from normal human relationships and experiences. His need to maintain secrecy and control had prevented him from trusting anyone completely, creating a psychological burden that few people could sustain indefinitely. Success in his world required sacrificing authenticity and genuine connection in ways that ultimately left him more alone than he had been when he started. The law enforcement response to Kevin's operation has changed how agencies investigate modern criminal enterprises. The integration of legitimate and illegal activities requires investigative approaches that combine traditional organized crime techniques with corporate fraud methods and entertainment industry expertise. Kevin's success in evading detection for so long has forced agencies to develop new capabilities and partnerships that can address the complexity of modern criminal operations. The impact on Nine Trey as an organization was devastating once Kevin's true role was exposed. Without his strategic leadership and business acumen, the gang reverted to more traditional criminal activities that were easier for law enforcement to detect and prosecute. The sophisticated financial structures he had created collapsed, leaving members to pursue individual criminal careers that lacked the protection and resources he had provided. His arrest essentially ended Nine Trey as a significant criminal organization, demonstrating how important his leadership had been to their success. The entertainment industry has been forced to reevaluate its relationships with street culture and gang-affiliated individuals in the wake of the revelations about Kevin's operation. Record labels, concert promoters, and other industry professionals now understand that what appears to be authentic street credibility may actually be sophisticated criminal enterprise designed to exploit their resources and reputation. The romanticization of gang culture within hip-hop has become more complicated as people recognize the real-world consequences of these associations. Today, from the relative safety of witness protection, I reflect on the extraordinary operation I witnessed and participated in during my time with Nine Trey. Kevin Thompson wasn't just a drug dealer who got lucky. He was a criminal genius who understood business, psychology, and market dynamics in ways that allowed him to build an empire that operated successfully for years before being detected. His downfall came not from traditional gang investigation methods, but from the sheer scope of his success, which eventually attracted the kind of attention that even his sophisticated protective measures couldn't deflect. The story of Kevin and Nine Trey represents something larger than just another criminal organization. It demonstrates how modern illegal enterprises can integrate with legitimate industries in ways that make detection extremely difficult. It shows how fame and entertainment can be weaponized to serve criminal purposes while appearing completely innocent to outside observers. Most importantly, it reveals how the most dangerous criminals are often those who never appear dangerous at all, who build their empires in boardrooms rather than on street corners, and who understand that real power operates invisibly. The legacy of Kevin's operation continues to influence both criminal enterprises and law enforcement approaches to investigating them. His model has been studied and copied by other criminal organizations seeking to minimize their exposure while maximizing their profits. Meanwhile, law enforcement agencies have developed new capabilities specifically designed to detect and investigate the kind of integrated operations he created. The cat-and-mouse game between criminals and law enforcement has been permanently changed by what Kevin accomplished and how he was eventually brought down. In the end, Kevin Thompson proved that the most successful criminal leaders are those who understand that crime is ultimately a business, and the most successful businesses are those that appear completely legitimate to everyone except those who run them. His empire collapsed not because his strategy was flawed, but because no criminal operation, no matter how sophisticated, can remain invisible indefinitely once it reaches a certain scale of success. The very achievements that made him powerful ultimately led to his downfall, demonstrating that in the modern era, success itself has become the enemy of criminal enterprises that depend on anonymity for their survival.